This is Slasher at the end of Blizzcon, and I'm here with Totalbiscuit, who casted the Hearthstone tournament the entire weekend. Also played a lot of Heroes, got to see WCS. So a lot of things going on at BlizzCon. What are your general thoughts of the weekend? What were you most interested in?
Well, it was cool to see a couple of new titles basically on display in the form of the Diablo 3 expansion as well as Heroes of the Storm. It was very exciting to get to have a look at that. And it seems like there's a little bit of relevance to BlizzCon, at least this year, because they're able to actually show a bunch of new stuff as opposed to just an expansion pack. I feel ultimately BlizzCon has always been sort of this weird melding of what's basically a gigantic fan meeting and more of a light trade show. And it hasn't necessarily in the past succeeded in a major way at either, but I feel this time around they did have enough content. They now have a breadth of games to the point where they don't have to roll out a SNES version of Blackthorn and say, hey, yeah, this will be fun to play, right? They actually have new titles and new stuff on the horizon, which is interesting to see. And of course, the esports presence here with WCS is stronger than it's ever been.
I mean, you were casting Hearthstone the entire weekend, hit over 100,000 viewers at one point, and Artosis has won the only championship he has ever won, and probably the only time we're going to see Artosis wins BlizzCon and a title, I think, forever after. What are your thoughts on seeing Hearthstone played in a competitive format?
I don't think we should allow Artosis to play again because I feel that he's going to be insufferable for weeks now, and a repeat of that would not be good. But it's interesting to see what's essentially a virtual card game played in a competitive environment. It's not the first time. It's not like anyone has never played a card game competitively. Magic the Gathering has plenty of pro tours. We see regular plays on Twitch TV, for example. It's gained a lot of popularity, and that is a game where a random factor can come into play. And there are plenty of other games, including, of course, poker, where that becomes a factor as well. And you will find that a lot of people still like it. And I think actually it adds a nice little dynamic to the viewer experience because they don't exactly know what's going to come off the top of the deck. And that adds a degree of tension. And then you factor in the aspect of a sort of informational asymmetry in the sense that one player doesn't know what the other is doing, but the audience sees both. I like to call it the Hitchcock moment. So you know the bomb's in the room, but the actors don't know. You know, the characters in the movie, that's where tension is built, right? So the combination of just a little bit of luck and that informational asymmetry actually makes it a very compelling viewer experience. It may not be the most competitive thing ever, but ultimately it doesn't need to be because people still want to watch it.
So is this a novelty just for BlizzCon, or could you see this at the next, DreamHack, MLG, ESL event?
Whatever's got an audience can go on. You know, it's not like DreamHack hasn't run tournaments that barely anyone watches. You know, for instance, Quake sometimes is played from time to time, and no one seems to watch that. So that's
Hey, I'm all in there, man.
fair enough. Yeah.
Just me.
I mean, would you like to get into the shoot mania scene? I hear that's thriving right now. But regardless, I think that the situation is as long as there is an audience for it, people find it exciting, and there are interesting personalities playing it, then you're going to have a good enough audience to see that happen. We do need a spectator mode because ultimately the setup was threadbare at best, and it did negatively impact the casting and the viewer experience. But the production team did a phenomenal job, basically putting together a spectator interface where there wasn't one in the program itself. So they had to kind of just jack it together from whatever they could production assets wise. So as long as they add that, I think, yeah, we will see tournaments at other events, and hopefully we'll see interesting streamers go and attend them and actually win them, because ultimately those personalities are what's going to come through. This tournament was very successful because, one, Hearthstone is a very hot property right now, and secondly, most of the people playing in it are also very popular streamers, and myself, I do a fairly popular series on the game as well, so as a caster, I was also able to bring the audience in.
Initial thoughts on Heroes. Is this game going to be competitive?
Does it have to be competitive? I mean, if we were to look at the current landscape of Dota clones, oh, sorry, what do they call it now? A hero brawler?
5-on-5 brawler.
Could they not do that? Because I know what a brawler is. It's called Streets of Rage 2, and last I checked, that was not anything like that. So they can probably come up with a better name for it. I've been working on an acronym for years. I haven't come up with anything better, but ultimately Hero Brawler might be the worst. Anyway, regardless, I don't think it has to be competitive because we already have plenty of those kind of games that are actually competitive and have good competitive scenes, and you can switch between the two. You know, League of Legends and Dota 2 both have very viable competitive scenes. Heroes of Newerth still has a viable competitive scene. Ultimately, I want them to make a game that's actually fun. As someone that's played thousands of hours of both Dota 2 and League of Legends and is willing to watch Dota 2 in a competitive environment, I have no real desire to watch Heroes of the Storm competitively, but I do have a desire to play it because it looks like fun. And ultimately, if you look at how Hearthstone's done, it's the same principle. People got into it because it looked like fun. A competitive scene developed because there were enough people interested in making one. So as long as they decide to organically grow the competitive scene from the ground up and just stop trying to like force it before the game's even out, then I think it'll do okay. It will get an audience.
You've been pretty outspoken on WCS throughout the year, of course, as you have a team who has played in several different regions at once. Now that we're at BlizzCon, the season is over, the year is over. What are your thoughts about WCS? So now that it's done and going into next year.
Well, ultimately, we broke a lot of eggs to make this particular omelet that was the Grand Finals, and the Grand Finals worked out well because we did get the best 16 players. There were perhaps some players that should have been here that weren't, but ultimately the skill level was very much equal, and as a direct result, we had some really exciting games. I feel there are better ways to get that final 16 going into next year, and I also feel that if they were attempting to create a storyline and attempting to create real champions that actually mattered, they kind of failed to do that, and it especially comes down to the idea that the Grand Slams crown a champion about a week after 3 other champions just got crowned, and then when that guy bombs out in the round of 16, it kind of ruins the whole storyline ultimately. Plus, it involves the players flying all over the place. We've seen a lot of player-related fatigue really screwing things up there. I think that at the end of the year, perhaps WCS did more damage than it actually benefited the scene. I know for a fact that Blizzard wasn't intending for that to happen, but I also know that they've been very receptive now to feedback. They seem to have realized, look, okay, WCS is going to exist in some form, but we've got to do something about it. We have to deal with a little bit of the content saturation. Maybe we get rid of the Grand Slams, and we have to make the storylines a little bit more approachable. And we also have to look at the way that it's broadcast, because at the moment, WCS America is flagging in terms of both views and really just the overall environment. And the round of 32 online is something that a lot of people aren't really interested in and is having growing problems. So yeah, I mean, it's a system that I expect to see go into 2014, but not without some significant changes. And I do hope that Blizzard is willing to actually take an axe to some components of it, improve and keep on the stuff that actually works, and just have a serious rethink about everything else and where it's going forward. Because while, of course, our players have benefited and they've been able to win some money here and there, the overall cost, especially to Korean teams when it comes to travel, is extremely high. Blizzard doesn't provide any support for that, and ultimately the Korean scene is sort of brain draining out to different regions, which is really unfortunate. Whereas I think more competition in Korea, considering there's way more great players in Korea than could ever possibly fit into a GSL, would be the way to go.
Do you believe that BlizzCon with ESL running the production and the finals that we had here was what you had wanted to see for the grand finals of the year?
It was ultimately really solid, but I'm going to be honest, I think that's the sort of standard we should be striving for with all of the regular WCS content. It looked great, but was there anything, I'm interviewing you now, was there anything that you would have said that just like kind of sprung out at you saying, wow, no tournament's ever done this before, or it's just ultimately better? Like in terms of production value, yeah, you've got better cameras, you've got better camera crews, you've got more resources, but the WCS Season 3 finals ultimately did pretty much what this did. The addition of the expert desk is certainly helpful for filling time. I feel it could perhaps be better staffed. I think you need more pros on there and you need a greater mix of races. And maybe you don't need 5 people. Maybe you just need one representative of each race and an anchor host that knows what he's doing. DJ Wheat did a fantastic job of anchoring that desk, I might add, and hopefully we get to see that in future. But I think that needs to be the standard that all of the WCS stuff needs to actually reach. And ultimately, right now, it's not getting there. I think the GSL production value is still the gold standard. I love the way that they do that tournament, and I think it is very exciting as a result. ESL is definitely getting there in its own way, and ASL has tripped over itself a little bit, but they also had less time to prepare after the transition between MLG, the in-house Blizzard stuff, and then NASL. So ultimately, I think they'll be able to do a better job in future.
Thank you, Totalbiscuit, for the interview. I know you're doing a lot of content yourself, as well as doing the Hearthstone stage here. So what are we going to be seeing from you coming out of BlizzCon?
Well, an impression of Heroes of the Storm is obviously something that I'm working on right now. That's the kind of thing that I like to do at my conventions as well. If I go to PAX or whatever, I'll do a lot of impressions of forthcoming games. And I just got done recording, putting a Hearthstone Pro player through the ringer with a 24 Legendaries deck. And I think the people will find that particularly amusing. So just more the kind of light-hearted, more original Hearthstone content coming from me.
All right. Thank you. And we'll see you at when we're going to see you next.
Can't tell you. I'm contractually obliged not to say.
PS4, Xbox One, sometime Totalbiscuit will be around, coming out in just a few weeks. Thank you, Totalbiscuit. Stay tuned to OnGamers.com for all the coverage of BlizzCon Global Finals.